Breeze just received the biggest rework we've seen, and these changes make the map feel much better in my opinion, especially for dome smokers. The more narrow corridors and chokes make it so dome smokers are actually viable, but likely still favor the wall smokes of Viper and Harbor. Astra is absolutely viable on this map now, so let's get right into the guide so you can be equipped with the best possible util for Breeze. I'm Chill, and let's get into it. If you're interested in free VOD reviews, pro playbooks, private guides, and more, check out my Discord in the description below. All right, back to the video. Okay, so we're gonna start over on A site on attack, and I'll show you where her smokes can go on site depending on how you're executing, whether it's a 5-man through A main, or if you're maybe taking mid control or splitting A. So let's say your team is gonna hit site as 5 from A main. You'll notice that the pyramids are a lot wider now, and you can actually put a smoke right in between there and one on the left here. These two smokes will actually just help you get into site pretty easily. The only angles you'll really have to be careful of is this back cubby angle and, you know, the traditional spot where defenders like to play behind pyramid here. A lot of times they'll like to peek from this angle here. So using these two smokes in between the pyramid and the left side of site are probably going to be your best bet. In terms of where to concuss and suck, I think the best spot has usually been this cubby back here for the concuss. It'll just hit anyone in here. So if you have like a Jet or Neon executing on a site, they can quickly scale up onto this player and get a pick. The other spot can be a suck back site like this. This suck makes it kind of difficult for the player playing back a pyramid to peek or hide behind this area. And it kind of actually forces them out into a peek. So you want to be ready for that when you actually activate the suck. So that's what I would say is probably a nice default that you can use on attack on a normal buy. This is even good for maybe an eco round because the smokes are kind of close to you. So those eco weapons are going to be, you know, pretty nice when you're executing on the site here. So when you're splitting A from mid and A main, what I think is a good idea that you can do here is actually use this mid smoke as a recall to get across. It's a pretty narrow corridor here, and they actually made it a lot easier to cross this angle without being exposed to nest completely. There's kind of like half of nest that is going to be exposed when you're crossing this. So you just have to kind of watch out for nest and the tunnel right here that goes to B. Just make sure you check it in case anyone walked up here. But I think this recall is going to be pretty good to help your team get across quickly, especially if you're going for more of like a rush play. And then once you get here, you can actually just put a smoke a little bit deep back here so it kind of touches the box and the side of the wall on the left and the pyramid on the right. And this smoke is actually really good because it also blocks in case a Jet updrafted onto the box. You can't actually get onto this box anymore by like just jumping up. So they actually reduce a lot of the verticality in this map, which is nice. And then when your teammates are coming from A main, you can still do the normal, you know, mid pyramid smoke like this, and then you can plant over here. So this gives you a little bit more map control compared to going just through, you know, 5-man through A main. You get like basically all front of sight, and you can even try to post up here after getting a pick for the retake. And in terms of the suck and concuss, that's going to be obviously situational, but I would probably use the same ones that you did for the default, which is that concuss and cubby back here and the suck back site. You could either do it back right pyramid or back left pyramid, or even if you suspect a player on like an eco round is playing close left, you can just concuss here as well. That also works. So those are kind of like the main spots where I would use my other abilities like my concuss and suck. So when executing onto A with your ult, I would say most of the time, if you're going to 5-man through A main, you can pretty much mimic the Viper wall that goes across the right side pyramid diagonally. So you can just pop a, you know, easy ult like this, get onto site, plant the bomb. If you suspect someone's going to peek back here, you can always throw like a suck as well right there. And obviously the concuss on the right side as well. So you really just take away all this space from the enemy, plant the bomb, and then, you know, get out, or you can even post up on site. I think since there's not really a area in front of pyramid to plant anymore, the default might actually be either in front here if you do want to play main, and if you're going to plant over here, I would say it's probably even better to try to plant against this wall. That way you can play in A main without having to worry about someone tucking in here, since the bomb is not going to actually overextend out of the site anymore. It's going to be a little bit easier for someone to kind of post up right here and defuse, and you can't really play main from that position. So I would say the best place to plant now, if you're going to play in main and you're going to plant on this side, is probably right here. Anywhere kind of along this wall is going to, you know, be your best bet if you want to play from main. For an alternative ult, you could likely cut the site in half this way, basically splitting like back site and front site. And this wall kind of allows you, if you're taking mid, to kind of cut off this area as well. It basically cuts the entire map in half. And if you're splitting this wall might actually be a little bit better, so that you can kind of take site with your team that way. Just some heads on what you and your team are going to do that round. Okay, so that's going to be it for A site on attack. We'll go over mid in a little bit, but first let's go over B, and I'll show you a couple ways that you can smoke B to get onto site, depending on your economy and what you have in terms of ults and that kind of thing. For your default standard smokes, I would say this smoke here and likely this one in the back are going to be the easiest ones that you can use to get onto site. This one's also going to be really good for an eco round. A lot of people, when they actually did play Astra occasionally on this map, the pros would actually put a smoke here as well. It was a little bit wider, I believe, before they made the changes, but this smoke is still good. And all you have to really do is worry about like these close angles on the left and right and back pillar. Back pillar, I would use a suck like this. And it kind of makes it really difficult for this player to peek from this angle. And you can also use a concuss, and I would probably place it, if you're going to put it on the left here at this common angle where a lot of defenders will play, I would kind of put it in line with this pillar on the right here. So that way when it does concuss, it concusses up to about here if they're holding like a close angle. And if they are playing a little bit further back, holding kind of like a pixel angle, it kind of forces them out of this spot. And they also can't play in this little tiny corner either if they're using like a Bucky or something like that. You can obviously also concuss back a site like here, kind of same idea. If you're taking control of elbow and you got a dart up and the dart hit here or something like that, or the dart hit back here and there was no one playing close left, and you saw someone back site, then maybe you want to put like a concuss either back here or on the side here if you suspect they're going to peek with like an op or something like that. So it kind of depends on the position of the enemy. And this smoke back here is just good for, you know, taking kind of full control of site. Okay, for a secondary variation of your smokes, instead of smoking this close cubby and you want to take kind of more full control of site, you can also smoke right here, and you can stick with the backside smoke there. This one gives you a lot more control of sight. You can kind of post up anywhere in here, preventing vision from arches that way and tunnel this way. You can still use your standard concuss either on the right side cubby there, left, or anywhere in the backside. I would still probably suck backside. This suck gets a lot of value for any you know, opper maybe playing this angle. The only downside of like these smokes is that you'll have to be extra wary of like the right side peak or left side peaks. You definitely want to make sure that you have, if you have like a Sova or a Fade or something like that, you want to get like a dart back sight. That way you can see, you know, which side of the pillar they're going to peek from. Pretty straightforward on B site. There's not really much to it. And again, pretty straightforward with the wall as well. You can either do that diagonal wall that kind of cuts across and cuts pillar in half, allowing you to kind of play in the default spot here, cutting off any peeks from back sight and making it difficult for this player to peek as well without exposing themselves. And the alternative wall that you can do is probably going to be one that cuts the site across like this. This works as well. And you can also, you know, do the same thing with the suck back sight. This will obviously mimic those two smokes that are here and give you a lot more control of sight. So really just make sure you communicate with your team and let them know what the options are in terms of the walls that you can use. So when you're doing a B split, obviously if you're coming up elbow here, you can place a smoke in nest. It's a lot easier to smoke this now. So even if you're playing a controller like Omen or Brim or something like that, you can easily smoke this and your smoke will be, you know, big enough obviously to cover the entire choke. You just have to make sure that when you are crossing this area you might want to have another player kind of like lurking up mid this way so that you can get vision of the player on that area between the wooden doors. Kind of similar thing, you want to smoke here, and then you can actually smoke a little bit deeper as well in the arches. So you would come up this way and smoke a little bit deeper by arches as well, and then you get even more map control. There's obviously going to be likely a fight here, so you can always concuss here, concuss like that. And you can always do like a suck back sight as well. Really just depends on what info you have on the enemies. And if you are doing a B split and you want a wall, you can simply just do a wall like this that kind of cuts off the nest here and cuts off arches this way. Pretty straightforward, the wall in this one. Nothing too complicated here, just cutting off the two chokes that lead into mid and lead into sight. Okay, so now we're gonna take some mid control. A really common smoke that you'll see pros use is this one that kind of blocks off mid doors, allowing you to kind of scale up this way. And you can kind of decide if you want to smoke this as you peek it, or if you want to keep that open while you lurk up. It really depends if you're rushing mid or if you're kind of like walking up. If you're kind of walking up, you can always, you know, jiggle this, peek, walk up this way. And it really depends on like the info that your team has and if they want to take that fight or not. If you are walking up mid, you'll likely have someone come up elbow as well. And obviously, if you do end up hitting B, you're probably not going to have a smoke when you go from mid to B. So you just got to be careful of that. But you can still use a, you know, concuss in this position. You can even put maybe a suck back of the pillar that way, concuss here. Because if the enemy sees that you're coming up mid, there's going to be likely a player playing behind this pillar, you know, holding this position. That's kind of the options you have for the mid smokes. One more thing I forgot to mention: if you do want to go mid to A and you're 5 stacking, you can even do like a deeper smoke this way if you want to block off tunnel and nest, or in case they kind of like lurked up elbow. You know, this is probably going to be your best smoke. It does block off of nest. Just want to make sure that you position it maybe a little bit more to the right by this box. That way the top of the smoke completely blocks nest. And the only way that you'll really be able to see over this smoke if you are on defense is to kind of jump here. You might be able to catch them if you're jumping. So I would say that's probably your best smoke. You can also smoke this as well, especially if you're on an eco. This might be a little bit better just to completely block everything. But I would say if you do want to at least have some kind of lurk going up mid as your teammates take mid to A, I would say this smoke might be a little better. You can even like insert yourself in here as your team kind of makes noise going A. You can even lurk up into this smoke, maybe go for like a cheeky play in nest, get a pick here, get a pick here, and then continue your lurk back this way. This is very common. I'm sure if you've played Breeze, you've been, you know, on the receiving end of this lurk, or you've even done it yourself. So all right, so over on defense, we're likely going to play on A site due to the fact that your Sentinel player is normally going to play on B site, but it really depends on what your team's doing and if your Sentinel's playing A or B, or kind of like, you know, where they're positioned. But most of the time you'll want to play A site. So for a default setup, you can just put a smoke in the A main choke and the B main choke. And if they're coming A site, we'll focus on that for now before we worry about mid. We're going to smoke A main when they're coming in, and, you know, similar suck to any other site that you've played with Astra. That's pretty much the main default that you're going to have here. And if the attackers are splitting site and they're coming A and mid, we'll quickly talk about some smokes that you can use in mid. So depending on if you are playing in this position or if you have a teammate who's kind of posted up here, you know, maybe fighting for this, you're gonna have to kind of figure that out before the round starts. If you're gonna play more of a more passive position like this, where you're kind of just holding an angle, you know, maybe you have a jet that's like opping this position, so you really wouldn't want to smoke it. But I would say if you are fighting for control of this space and you have a player pushed up into the halls here, you could probably just put a smoke right here. And this makes it really difficult for them to push through the space and take over the wood doors position. Obviously, this kind of allows them to push through top mid. So it's going to really depend on, you know, if you think they're splitting A site, if you have some info on the players that are coming A and they're also coming mid, then you can kind of assume that's going to be more of an A split. So in that case, you can likely just put like a smoke here. And the other position is obviously going to be pushed up further into the doors this way. That way you can kind of maybe help your teammate who's maybe fighting on this side. And if they come through this smoke, this is probably going to be best used with a eco buy. So that way when they push through, you can, you know, quickly spray them down, fall back, and, you know, you're playing in these like close ranges with this smoke. So I would say like on an ego round, if they're splitting A or if they're all coming through mid, this smoke might be a little bit better. It's really going to depend on like where you're positioned. If you're all the way back here and you haven't put down a star yet, I would say if you hear some activity mid, putting a star here might not be the best idea, because they might have already crossed through into door this way. So you'll likely want to put the smoke right here instead. Really kind of just depends on how you're playing on site and if you're contesting mid or not. So in terms of like what to do with your abilities, if you have a concuss and you suspect players are in this cubby here, you can always concuss that way. Maybe throw some util from your teammates that are like damage dealing abilities. They can go right in that corner. The concuss can be saved for retake if you want to, you know, if you're coming back onto site and need to maybe concuss this spot or this spot. If they're coming from mid, obviously if you're using this smoke, you can also, you know, place a concuss in here. They are coming through your smoke and, you know, you hear footsteps, you can always concuss this, and it pretty much hits the entire area of wood door. So that's going to be, you know, a really good concuss. And another really good smoke that you can use is if the enemies are coming through this way and you're on an eco round, you can always use a secondary smoke right here to, you know, quickly put down. So if they're actually executing this way, you can put down this second smoke. You can even prepare prepare the smoke before the round starts and just have like a star here ready to go if you suspect that they're going to hit a site. That way you don't have to go into astral form and put the star down, and that way, you know, if they have like a jet or someone who can take space really quickly, like a neon or something, you won't have to worry about being in astral form, getting the star down, and then just getting like shotgunned or something. So you can always place the star here before the round starts instead of like the suck in front. So you have like your kind of 3 stars this way. So if they are coming in and you have like a teammate playing on, you know, this side of pyramid, at least they can maybe like fight that. But if they're rushing you, you can always smoke this. And coming through this like really narrow section of pyramids is going to be really difficult. They're going to have to use like mollies and stuff that kind of push you out. And you can always, you know, play here with like a stinger. If you end up using this, you know, make sure if they have flashes just to maybe not play out in the open here. You maybe want to still like play backside like this so you can dodge the flash quickly. But this smoke can be really good to kind of fight for control of like the enemy planting on this side of site. So one more thing about A site on defense is you can use this star to technically do a bit of a one-way here. I would put it kind of right in the middle of the box, and you can kind of push up into this position, and you do technically get this little one-way here that you can kind of spray down. But I would say if you are going to one-way this, it's probably better if you do this as like an omen or a brim, because the smokes are a little bit smaller. You get more length between the bottom of the smoke and where you can kind of see their feet pushing through. It's a little bit more risky than using like an omen smoke one way, but it can work. Now let's talk a little bit about retake smokes and abilities. When you're coming back through A lot of the times you'll want to either concuss either deep in this position or maybe a little bit closer here, and maybe throw like a suck here. You know, this could be a really good position to hold as an attacker. You can kind of hold this cross here. It's kind of a nice little off angle you can play. Sometimes they'll probably be posted up here if they maybe have like a Bucky or a Judge or something. And then this position is good just to kind of like flush them out of this spot and kind of like retake this space. If you do have a smoke up by the time the retake is happening, I would say the best place to smoke is going to be in between the pyramids, because it's really awkward to kind of take back this space. Also look behind you while making sure you don't get peeked this way. I'm sure if you've ever retaken on breeze on A, it's felt very like difficult because there's so many angles, and you're basically eliminating like 1, 2, 3, 4, even like 5 angles when you're smoking in between pyramid here, since it's a lot wider. So I would say, you know, retaking from kind of the spawn area, or if you're coming out of like this door and you want to get across to this side, I would say the best smoke that you can probably use is going to be this one. That way you can save your other ability as like a concuss here, push up, clear these angles, and go for the defuse. If maybe there's only one guy left and you know he's playing shop or something like that, you can probably just save your last star as a smoke and then just stick the defuse that way. That's also an option. In terms of ulting, since there's no front sight anymore for your ult, you can pretty much just throw a wall straight across. You know, if they plant here, defuse like this. Same thing goes for this side. This allows you kind of easy defuse behind the wall. And if they are playing in main, they're basically going to have like not a lot of time to get into position. That's going to be your retake wall. If they do plant on this side, you could even do like a diagonal wall across pillar. That way you can kind of like cross this position. You don't have to worry about any angles from mid, and you can kind of just retake site this way and stick the bomb. So that's an alternative that you can use when you are retaking with the wall. If we are playing on B side here, obviously we're going to have that smoke and the suck in front. You know, very normal strategy here. If you're going to be playing on site, you can either play this kind of back pillar position and play off of that suck this way, or you can play back site and play from this position as well. This might be a little bit easier since you're a little bit closer with the suck. So that's how I would position my smoke here. If they're doing like a split from mid and B, you can do a little bit of a deeper smoke into tunnel this way. You might have to kind of like fall back and pull the smoke from this position, or even from like arches from, you know, the half wall this way. And if your teammates need to smoke, you know, mid site, you can throw like a smoke like this so that they can use that to kind of, you know, play around pillar a little bit more easily. B site, pretty straightforward. Let's take a look at the retake now. So when retaking on B, depending on if you have mid control or not, you can either put a smoke here to come through, either put a smoke in main, but I would say it might be even better to, you know, smoke mid site like this. That way you don't have to worry about that main angle and any like close angles here. And you can kind of just focus on these two angles. You know, tip for the jump up is this little octopus kind of tells you, you know, where they're going to be jumping up. So just keep that in mind when you are, you know, maybe holding the wall. And if you want to go back sight like this, you can always put a concuss here so that they can't peek you from this direction. Can you also use like a recall star to get across like this? Sure, you know, you can always be creative and try to do something like that as well. You know, don't neglect the recall ability. I do consider that kind of its own ability, but sometimes it's just better to use like a full smoke. And when it comes to your retake wall, you can either do a diagonal wall like this, which kind of mimics like Viper's retake wall. If you've ever seen, you know, pro players like set up a wall like that, cuts off basically everything, allowing you to get onto site. You only have to fight the site players, and you can kind of defuse right here. The other option is if you have teammates retaking from mid and arches, you can just do that normal wall that kind of cuts the front of sight off. You know, this one's probably just as good. You can always put a concuss here when you're retaking from arches. That way, you know, you don't get peeked from this position. Last thing I want to mention is the smokes for mid. If you are, you know, playing this position, or if your teammate needs a smoke, I would say, you know, the two best positions that you can use the smoke is if they are 5-manning through mid here, is obviously this smoke. The smoke will kind of force the attackers to, they can be risky and push through it, or they might have to use some util. I probably wouldn't recommend using both smokes in mid unless, you know, that's something that they're doing frequently. If you smoke both of these, they'll likely just fall back and then hit A, and then you're not going to have any smokes for the retake on A. So if you are going to smoke mid, it's probably best just to use one or the other. If they're doing kind of like a B split, you can always smoke this and this, because they're going to likely come up through the elbow position this way. So, you know, you can smoke this for your B defenders, and then you can smoke this for the elbow player. If they are coming up through mid and your teammates need help, obviously you can throw this smoke down. This smoke might force them to kind of come up through the nest here and take this fight. So just got to be aware of what your smokes are doing and how they're going to force the attackers to move. And that's going to do it for the guide for Astra on Breeze. I hope you guys found this helpful. And if you did, leave a comment below. Subscribe if you want more guides like this, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.